Liquid Hungrybox is the only Jigglypuff player in Super Smash Bros. Melee who consistently places in the top 8s of basically every single tournament that he goes to. Since the Big House 4, where he placed 9th, every tournament that he's entered after that, he has gotten top 8 every single time, right? Except for Smash the Record 2016, but of course the Smash the Record tournaments, a lot of people are playing secondaries. It's not really a super serious tournament. As you can see, he played Ness the whole time, got 9th place. So that doesn't really count. Every other tournament that he has been to since then, he has gotten top 8, and very rarely placing outside the top 4 at any tournament. You know, he has a few 5th place, finishes sprinkled in here and there. Everything else is top 4, and this level of consistency with Jigglypuff has presented something that I like to call the Hungrybox dilemma. And the problem with Hungrybox and top players right now is that Jigglypuff, first of all, I'd like to frame it by saying Jigglypuff does not play like other characters in Melee. And so universal Melee skills, you know, obviously the neutral, punish, and like edge guarding, those are like 3 of the most important things in Melee. They don't translate in fighting Jigglypuff the same way they do in a lot of other matchups, right? The way that you edge guard, you know, Fox and Falco, Marth, it's not the same, but it's very, very similar. And of course, edge guarding Hungrybox or Jigglypuff is much different than edge guarding basically every other character, right? And you know, the way you play neutral is much different. You know, neutral is usually pretty grounded. With Jigglypuff's in the air almost all the time. With punish game, you know, the punishes, other than Fox kind of has similar punishes on like a lot of the cast, but even so, like anything on the ground, you know, drill shine, that stuff really doesn't lead to anything. You know, if you watch the pros, they really don't get a lot off of shine, and they get off a ton off of shine in basically every other matchup. The throw combos are kind of the same, you know, up throw, up air. He kind of does that to the whole cast. Fox we're talking about. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that all the skills that apply to beating like Marth, Sheik, other Spaceys, the skills that you use to beat those characters don't necessarily apply to Jigglypuff in the same way. You have to play much differently in order to compete with a Jigglypuff of the same skill level. And with that said, Jigglypuff also is a very underrepresented character in top level Melee. Outside of Hungrybox, there is nobody else who plays Jigglypuff and is a tournament threat at majors or even secondary tournaments. You know, nobody, there's no one else who even comes close to his level playing Jigglypuff, right? So because of this underrepresentation, top players now have this severe matchup problem with Hungrybox, because Hungrybox has more experience in every single matchup than a player playing any other character has against Jigglypuff, if that makes sense, right? Hungrybox has played 10 times more Foxes, 100 times more Foxes than any Fox has played Jigglypuff because of this underrepresentation. So this enormous experience gap has led to him sort of having this just grip on the meta, where people now have to figure out a way, how do we adapt to this? How do we adapt to Hungrybox, right? A lot of the meta is central around Hungrybox because he's so good and because he's the only Jigglypuff. And even kind of as a side note, even further in the matchup experience column, he I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard it from other players. I've heard it through, just passing comments. I've heard he does not play other top players in friendlies. And of course, if, for Hungrybox, that is a great move. Why would you give away your advantages, right? There's honestly, he really doesn't have a reason to give these players experience because he already has so much experience against Fox in particular. That to play friendlies with somebody else that's a top player is giving them much more of a level up than it is giving him, right? So it's actually detrimental to his own competitive drive to give these people the matchup experience, right, in friendlies. And so far, everyone's solution to this has been picking Fox into Hungrybox because obviously Fox against Jigglypuff is the most fleshed out of the top tiers, the matchup against Jigglypuff. So this really has led to this sort of diluting of top 8s in big tournaments. And what I mean by diluting is you're seeing Fox versus Puff, Fox versus Puff, Fox versus Puff. It's sort of dominating the top 8s of the big tournaments now, this matchup in particular. And as sort of a secondary side effect, it's leading to viewer fatigue. People are sick of seeing this matchup, which, of course, like, you do the same thing over and over in any aspect of life, it's going to get boring. So people, a lot of people are sick of seeing this matchup. But in a more competitive note, it's widening the gap even more of Hungrybox's experience gap, right? And I mean, even you just take Smash Summit 5, which just happened, and you look at the top 12, look at Hungrybox's run, right? Hungrybox over SFAT 3-0, Fox. 3-1 Mango, Fox. 3-1 Leffen, Fox. 3-2 Armada, Fox, right? So top 8, you're looking at the top 8 players here. So that means 1, 2, 3 of the matches, winners finals, grand finals, and one of the winners semis, all are Fox versus Puff. And of course, 3 different players. Armada, who is a Fox Peach main, plays both characters, mostly Peach. Leffen, of course, only Fox. Mango, a lot of Falco and Fox, SFAT Fox player. And so all these players are picking Fox into Hungrybox, which of course, really isn't helping the HBox dilemma. And so I would put forth, these sort of suggestions as something I think that might help this this sort of dilemma that we've got with Hungrybox. And that would be, first and foremost, the easiest way to solve this would be to have another relevant Puff, or multiple relevant Puffs, players that are threatening at the top level with Jigglypuff, and multiple of them, right? Because then they can get experience. All these players can get experience against Jigglypuff, and that'll eventually sort of close the gap even marginally towards Hungrybox's giant experience advantage. And that seems like, I mean, honestly, none of these solutions that I'm giving here seem particularly likely, but that one could be the most likely. We would just need a rise in Puffs. We need other Puffs to become good and become relevant and become tournament threats in order for these other players to gain matchup experience. Another option, the long-term grinding, and we need another player to stick to another matchup, right? That could be another solution, somebody trying to really flesh out Marth, Falcon, Falco, and Sheik in this matchup against Jigglypuff, and really commit to it, right? Because people have tried, I know Mango has tried playing Falco. I know, Pew Pew even has given Hungrybox a pretty good run a couple times with his Marth. Captain Falcon, of course, Wizrobe always recently has given him a few, very close calls. S2J even given him a close call recently. And Sheik, of course, Plup has beaten him a few times, even notably once at Evo, and that was with Sheik. I think we don't know enough about those matchups to really say, is it not worth it against Hungrybox, right? Somebody is going to have to commit long term to a different character in order to sort of prove this, right? And no one's been willing to commit so far. People have tried things, and when they fail, they sort of just give up. And just because it's much easier to sort of lean on a Fox, which has a much better matchup, like theoretically, right? And obviously all the options are much more available to study, much more fleshed out, It's easier to discover all these different Fox combos and Fox ways to deal with Jigglypuff than it is for someone like Marth, which really doesn't have much to go off of. You sort of have to invent new things, right? And so that is one possible solution. Somebody's really got to commit to another character, another top tier that is potentially, could potentially have a good matchup. And I would even like to see, I've seen it recently in the past maybe year or so. I think there's still good improvements to be made on the laser game against Hungrybox. Obviously people like Mewtwo King, it seems like he might commit a little too hard to lasers. But I think, there's still progress to be made in the laser, Fox's laser versus Hungrybox. It's a way to put pressure at distance. And, obviously I feel like it's something that is a very tricky situation where you have to be able to be non-committal with it. To put pressure on him, and obviously don't, that's one of those things, obviously you just can't be predictable about it. So those are sort of my thoughts on the Hungrybox dilemma and a couple possible solutions. But it's going to be really interesting going into 2018 to see how these top players react to this. How are they gonna deal with Hungrybox?